What you're about to witness defies every law of the African savanna. A massive male lion forming an unbreakable brotherhood with his natural enemy, a helpless leopard cub. Their bond will challenge everything scientists thought they knew about territorial predators, and what unfolds between them will restore your faith in the impossible. The Masai Mara stretched endlessly under the blazing Kenyan sun, its golden grasslands shimmering like an ocean of amber. This ancient wilderness had witnessed countless dramas of survival, but nothing could have prepared the researchers at the Mara Predator Research Center for what was about to unfold. Dr. Elena Rodriguez adjusted her binoculars as she scanned the vast landscape from her elevated observation post, the familiar weight of 2 decades studying African wildlife heavy on her shoulders. The morning air carried the distant roar of lions claiming their territory, a sound that never failed to send shivers down her spine. As the lead behavioral ecologist at the center, Elena had documented thousands of predator interactions, published extensively on territorial behavior, and thought she understood the rigid hierarchies that governed these apex hunters. Lions and leopards were natural enemies, competing for the same prey, the same water sources, the same strategic territories. Their conflicts were legendary, often ending in bloodshed. The research station buzzed with its usual pre-dawn activity as Elena's team prepared for another day of field observations. Radio chatter filled the air as patrol units reported sightings across the reserve's 200,000 acres. The dry season had been particularly harsh this year, concentrating wildlife around the few remaining water sources and intensifying territorial disputes. Predator encounters were becoming more frequent and more violent. Elena paused her preparations as she noticed unusual radio silence from Sector 7, the remote northeastern quadrant of the reserve. This area, dominated by rocky outcroppings and dense acacia groves, was known for its unpredictable predator movements. Something about the morning felt different, charged with an energy she couldn't quite identify. Little did she know that within hours, she would witness an encounter that would challenge every assumption about predator behavior and force the scientific community to rewrite their understanding of interspecies relationships in the wild. The stage was set for a story that would captivate the world and prove that even in nature's most unforgiving arena, brotherhood could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. The emergency call crackled through Elena's radio at 6:47 a.m., cutting through the morning stillness like a blade. Dr. Rodriguez, we have a situation in Sector 7. Adult male lion, approximately 4 years old, showing signs of severe distress. He's not moving from a single location for the past 3 hours. Elena's heart sank as she recognized the description. This had to be Jengo, a magnificent lion she'd been tracking since he was a yearling. Named after the Swahili word for red due to his distinctive russet mane, Jengo had always been different from other lions. Born into the Quechua pride, he'd shown unusual behavioral patterns from early adolescence. Unlike typical young males who form bachelor coalitions with their brothers or cousins, Jengo had always been a solitary figure. 3 months earlier, tragedy had struck when a territorial dispute with the rival Tembo pride resulted in the death of Jengo's entire family. Elena had watched through her scope as the young lion returned to find the lifeless bodies of his pride scattered across their traditional resting ground. The scene had haunted her for weeks. Male lions, despite their reputation as fierce predators, form incredibly strong emotional bonds with their pride members. The loss of an entire family unit can trigger severe psychological trauma, leading to behaviors rarely documented in wild populations. When the research team reached Sector 7, they found Jengo lying motionless beside a dried riverbed, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the cracked earth. His golden eyes, normally alert and commanding, stared vacantly into the distance. Elena observed classic signs of what animal behaviorists term grief response syndrome, a condition where predators experience prolonged mourning periods after traumatic losses. Dr. Marcus Kimani, the center's veterinary specialist, approached cautiously with a tranquilizer rifle. His body temperature is elevated. And look at his breathing pattern, he whispered to Elena. Shallow, irregular. He's been like this for days. The lion's ribs were beginning to show through his coat, evidence that he hadn't hunted or eaten since the discovery of his dead pride. In the harsh African wilderness, a lion who stops hunting quickly becomes vulnerable to hyena packs, rival predators, and starvation. Jengo's powerful frame, once the embodiment of African strength, now seemed fragile and broken, a king dethroned by grief in the unforgiving theater of the wild. 40 miles southeast of Jengo's location, Ranger Moses Kiplagat was conducting his routine morning patrol when he heard the desperate cries echoing from a cluster of granite boulders. The sounds were high-pitched and urgent, the unmistakable distress calls of a big cat cub. Following the sound through the maze of rocks, Moses discovered a scene that made his stomach turn. Hidden beneath an overhanging ledge was a tiny leopard cub, no more than 8 weeks old, his spotted coat matted with dried blood and dirt. Scattered around the area were the remnants of what had clearly been a poaching operation. Wire snares, spent rifle cartridges, and most heartbreakingly, patches of adult leopard fur caught on the thorny bushes. The evidence painted a grim picture. The cub's mother had been killed for her valuable pelt, leaving her offspring to face certain death in the wilderness. The cub, whom the team would later name Duma after the Swahili word for cheetah due to his incredible speed even at such a young age, was in critical condition. Dr. Sarah Ocheng, the reserve's wildlife veterinarian, examined him with gentle hands while Elena observed. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, and he's got infected wounds on his hind legs from trying to escape the snares, Sarah reported grimly. His body temperature is dangerously low, 35.2 degrees Celsius when it should be 38.5. What made Duma's situation even more tragic was his exceptional nature. Even in his weakened state, Elena could see signs of remarkable intelligence and alertness. Leopard cubs typically depend on their mothers for the first 12 to 18 months of life, learning crucial hunting techniques, territorial boundaries, and survival instincts. Without this guidance, wild leopard cubs have less than a 10% survival rate. Unlike Jengo's physical strength, Duma possessed different gifts: incredible agility, heightened sensory awareness, and an almost supernatural ability to remain perfectly still when sensing danger. These traits, which would have made him an exceptional predator under his mother's tutelage, now meant nothing without someone to teach him how to use them. As Sarah administered emergency fluids and antibiotics to stabilize the tiny cub, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that fate was orchestrating something unprecedented. 2 apex predators, both alone, both broken by the same cruel world that had shaped them into natural enemies. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elena stared at the 2 behavioral reports spread across her desk in the research station's main office. The evening light cast long shadows through the windows as she studied the data from both animals. Jengo had been in the same location for 5 days, refusing all attempts at feeding, his body language suggesting deep psychological trauma. Duma, meanwhile, was recovering physically but showing extreme signs of separation anxiety, crying constantly for a mother who would never return. "We're going to lose them both," Dr. Kimani said quietly, reviewing the latest medical assessments. "Jengo's kidney function is starting to decline from dehydration, and Duma's stress hormones are through the roof. Even if we manage to keep the cub alive, he'll never develop proper hunting instincts without a maternal figure." Elena rubbed her temples, exhausted from days of unsuccessful intervention attempts. Then something clicked in her mind. A research paper she'd read years ago about cross-species bonding in captive environments. "Marcus, what do you know about alloparenting in big cats?" "Adoption behaviors? It's rare but documented. Lions have been known to adopt orphaned cubs from other prides, though usually only females and only within the same species." He paused, sensing where her thoughts were heading. "Elena, you're not seriously considering—" "Think about it," she interrupted, her voice gaining momentum. "Both animals are experiencing profound isolation. Jengo's lost his purpose. His role as a pride protector. Duma needs exactly what Jengo once provided: protection, guidance, companionship. In nature, male lions are actually the primary defenders of cubs, not just providers." Dr. Ocheng entered the conversation, shaking her head skeptically. "Elena, we're talking about natural enemies. Leopards are prey for lions in the wild. Jengo's hunting instincts could override any protective impulses, especially given his current psychological state." "But that's just it," Elena countered, pulling up behavioral studies on her laptop. "Jengo isn't hunting. His predatory drive has completely shut down due to grief." and male lions have incredibly strong paternal instincts when activated. The neurochemical pathways for protection and bonding are already established in his brain. They just need a trigger. She showed them footage of Jengo from better days, demonstrating classic protective behaviors with his pride's cubs. We've documented these exact same protective postures and vocalizations. The biological framework is there. The team spent 2 days preparing a neutral enclosure in the reserve's rehabilitation sector, a vast area surrounded by reinforced barriers but designed to feel as natural as possible. Ancient baobab trees provided shade while a natural spring created a small watering hole. Multiple escape routes and elevated platforms were strategically placed in case immediate separation became necessary. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the safety protocols one final time. Hidden tranquilizer stations were positioned at 4 points around the perimeter, and the entire veterinary team remained on standby. If we see any aggressive posturing from Jengo, ears back, tail lashing, crouched stance, we intervene immediately, she instructed the observation crew manning the concealed cameras. At dawn on the 3rd day, they carefully transported Duma to the enclosure first. The Leopard Cub, still weak but more alert after intensive care, immediately began exploring his new environment with tentative steps. His spotted coat had regained some of its natural luster, and his bright amber eyes darted constantly, cataloging every scent and sound. Despite his youth, Duma's instincts drove him to find elevated hiding spots, eventually settling on a low branch of an acacia tree, where he could observe his surroundings. 2 hours later, the delicate process of introducing Jengo began. The massive lion was guided into the enclosure through a separate entrance, his movement slow and deliberate. Elena watched through binoculars as Jengo paused at the threshold, his nostrils flaring as unfamiliar scents reached him. For the first time in days, his head lifted slightly, golden eyes scanning the area with a flicker of alertness. Initially, both animals seemed unaware of each other's presence. Jengo moved to the far side of the enclosure and settled beneath a large boulder, while Duma remained motionless in his tree, every muscle coiled and ready to flee. The research team maintained complete silence, knowing that any human interference could disrupt the delicate balance of this unprecedented introduction. For nearly 3 hours, nothing happened. Then Duma made a small movement, adjusting his position on the branch. The slight rustling of leaves caught Jengo's attention, and for the first time since losing his pride, the lion's head turned with purpose toward another living creature. Jengo's massive head slowly turned toward the sound, his ears rotating forward in a gesture Elena hadn't seen from him in weeks. The lion's golden eyes locked onto the small spotted figure perched 15 feet above him. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, predator and prey simply observed each other across the impossible divide of their natural roles. Then something extraordinary happened. Instead of the expected hunting crouch or aggressive posture, Jengo rose to his feet with deliberate calmness. His approach toward the tree was measured, almost gentle, lacking any of the stalking behaviors typical of a lion pursuing prey. Duma, meanwhile, remained perfectly still, his instincts telling him to flee but some deeper sense keeping him frozen in place. When Jengo reached the base of the acacia tree, he did something that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. The massive lion settled down directly beneath Duma's branch, positioning himself in a classic protective stance that male lions adopt when guarding cubs. His body formed a barrier between the leopard and any potential threats, while his massive head tilted upward to maintain visual contact with the small cub above. Duma's response was equally unprecedented. Rather than the expected panic or flight response, the young leopard began producing soft chirping sounds. Not the distress calls they'd heard before, but the contact vocalizations leopard cubs used to communicate with their mothers. These sounds seemed to trigger something profound in Jengo, whose ears perked forward and whose breathing pattern shifted to the rhythmic purring characteristic of content lions. Over the following hours, their interaction developed into something none of the researchers had ever witnessed. Duma gradually descended to lower branches, always maintaining escape routes, but clearly drawn to Jengo's protective presence. The lion, meanwhile, began exhibiting classic paternal behaviors: periodic scent marking around the tree's base, alert scanning of the perimeter, and soft rumbling vocalizations that typically serve to reassure cubs of their safety. By late afternoon, Duma had descended to the lowest branch, barely 8 feet above Jengo's massive form. When feeding time arrived, both animals were presented with separate meals, but something remarkable occurred. Jengo, who hadn't eaten in nearly a week, approached his food but then stepped back, looking up at Duma with an expression that seemed to convey invitation rather than dominance. 3 weeks had passed since that first extraordinary encounter, and the bond between Jengo and Duma had evolved into something that challenged every textbook on predator behavior. Elena documented daily observations that read like science fiction rather than wildlife research. Jengo had assumed the role of Duma's guardian with remarkable dedication, teaching the young leopard essential survival skills through demonstrations rather than typical feline play. Each morning began with Jengo's deep, rumbling calls. Not the territorial roars that echoed across the savannah, but gentle contact sounds that served as Duma's wake-up call. The leopard cub would descend from his preferred sleeping spot in the baobab tree and approach Jengo with complete trust, often rubbing against the lion's massive legs in greeting. Their daily routine included synchronized patrols of their territory, with Duma learning to read environmental cues by observing Jengo's reactions to various scents and sounds. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The most remarkable development was Jengo's hunting instruction. Unable to demonstrate typical leopard techniques, the lion adapted his teaching methods to show Duma stalking approaches, patience in waiting for prey, and the importance of wind direction. When small game occasionally wandered into their enclosure, Jengo would position himself strategically, allowing Duma to practice his natural climbing and pouncing instincts while providing backup security. Dr. Kimani had documented unprecedented physiological changes in both animals. Jengo's stress hormones had normalized, his appetite had fully returned, and his muscle mass was rebuilding to healthy levels. Duma showed accelerated development, his coordination and hunting reflexes advancing faster than typical for orphaned cubs. Most remarkably, both animals displayed synchronous behavioral patterns. Sleeping schedules, activity levels, and even digestive rhythms had aligned. Their relationship had attracted international attention from wildlife behaviorists, with researchers requesting permission to study this unique interspecies bond. Elena found herself fielding calls from universities worldwide, all seeking to understand how natural enemies had formed such an extraordinary partnership. But their peaceful world was about to face its greatest test. That morning, Elena received troubling reports from the outer perimeter patrols. A coalition of 3 adult male lions had been spotted moving toward their sector, displaying aggressive territorial behaviors and showing particular interest in the rehabilitation area where Jengo and Duma lived. The Mapogo coalition had earned their fearsome reputation across the greater Masai Mara ecosystem. 3 brothers in their prime, each weighing over 400 pounds, they had systematically eliminated rival males from territories spanning nearly 100 square miles. Their distinctive battle scars and synchronized hunting strategies made them the most formidable predator group in the region. Now, drawn by Jengo's scent markings and territorial calls, they were approaching the rehabilitation sector with lethal intent. Elena watched through her telephoto lens as the coalition crested the ridge overlooking Jengo and Duma's enclosure. The lead male, a massive lion with a black-tipped mane whom researchers had named Kafaru, paused to scent the air. His lips curled back in a distinctive grimace as he processed the complex odor signatures drifting from below. Not just a rival male, but something else entirely. Something that didn't belong. The invasion began at sunset. Kafaru and his brothers descended toward the enclosure with predatory precision, their massive forms moving like shadows through the golden grass. Their intent was unmistakable. Eliminate the territorial threat and claim this valuable water source for themselves. What they couldn't possibly understand was that their target wasn't just defending territory, but protecting family. Jengo sensed the approaching danger long before the coalition became visible. His entire demeanor shifted from the gentle guardian Elena had observed for weeks into something primal and fierce. Deep growls rumbled from his chest as he positioned himself between the approaching threat and Duma, who had instinctively climbed to his highest refuge in the baobab tree. The young leopard's spotted coat trembled as he pressed himself against the bark, every instinct screaming that death was approaching. The first confrontation erupted with explosive violence. Kafaru charged through the perimeter vegetation, expecting to find a lone, possibly weakened rival. Instead, he encountered a lion, transformed by protective fury. Jengo met the charge head-on, their collision sending shockwaves through the ground as 800 pounds of muscle and bone crashed together. The sound of their impact echoed across the savanna like thunder. Above them, Duma watched in terror as his protector engaged in a battle that would determine both their fates. The coalition's strategy became clear. While Kafaru engaged Jengo directly, his brothers circled to attack from multiple angles, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm any single opponent. The battle raged with devastating intensity as Jengo fought against impossible odds. Despite his courage and protective fury, the mathematics of the conflict were brutally simple. One lion, regardless of motivation, could not defeat 3 experienced killers working in perfect coordination. Kafaru's massive claws raked across Jengo's shoulder, opening deep gashes that stained his golden coat crimson. The second brother circled behind, preparing for a crushing bite to the spine that would end the fight permanently. But then something unprecedented happened in the violence-soaked theater of the African wild. From his perch high in the baobab tree, Duma made a choice that defied every survival instinct programmed into his leopard DNA. Instead of fleeing to safety as nature demanded, the young cub launched himself from the branch with a piercing battle cry that cut through the chaos like a blade. Duma's small but razor-sharp claws found their target on Kafaru's face, his lightweight body allowing him to move with lightning speed across the massive lion's head and shoulders. The coalition leader roared in surprise and pain as the leopard cub's claws raked across his eyes, temporarily blinding him and disrupting the coordinated attack. This split second of confusion was exactly what Jengo needed. With renewed strength born from witnessing Duma's incredible bravery, Jengo pressed his counterattack. He pivoted with surprising agility, using Kafaru's momentary blindness to land a devastating blow to the coalition leader's throat. The other 2 brothers, seeing their leader wounded and facing this unexpected 2-predator alliance, began to recalculate their strategy. The tide of battle shifted dramatically as Duma demonstrated fighting techniques no leopard cub should possess. His weeks of observing Jengo had taught him lion combat strategies, while his natural leopard agility made him nearly impossible to catch. He darted between the massive lions like a spotted shadow, creating confusion and preventing them from focusing their combined strength on Jengo alone. When Kafaru finally managed to clear his vision, he found himself facing not just a determined rival, but a partnership that violated every natural law. The sight of a lion and leopard fighting side by side, protecting each other with coordinated tactics, shook something deep in his predator consciousness. For the first time in their reign of terror, the Mapogo coalition faced an enemy they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, and couldn't defeat through brute force alone. The coalition's retreat came not through defeat, but through bewilderment. Kafaru, bleeding from multiple wounds inflicted by an 8-week-old leopard cub, made a tactical decision that would be whispered about in wildlife circles for years to come. He called his brothers back with a series of low grunts, acknowledging something unprecedented. They had encountered a bond stronger than territorial instinct, more powerful than predatory hierarchy. Rival. As the Mapogo coalition disappeared into the tall grass, Jengo and Duma stood side by side, both breathing heavily but victorious. The young leopard pressed against his lion brother's injured flank, purring softly as he licked the wounds he had helped defend. Jengo responded with gentle grooming strokes, cleaning Duma's fur with the careful attention of a devoted father. Dr. Elena Rodriguez lowered her binoculars with tears streaming down her face. In 20 years of wildlife research, she had never witnessed anything approaching this level of interspecies loyalty and courage. The footage captured that day would revolutionize understanding of animal consciousness, emotional depth, and the true meaning of family in the natural world. 6 months later, Jengo and Duma continue to thrive in their expanded territory at the Mara Research Center. Their story has inspired conservation efforts across Africa, proving that love and loyalty transcend the boundaries humans create between species. Jengo still serves as Duma's protector, while the now adolescent leopard has become the lion's most trusted scout and companion. Their brotherhood reminds us that in nature's harshest theater, the strongest force isn't size or speed or predatory instinct. It's the willingness to risk everything for those we love. If this incredible journey moved you as much as it moved us, Make sure to subscribe for more amazing stories of wildlife resilience and unexpected friendships. Hit that notification bell so you never miss these extraordinary tales from the African wilderness. What other unlikely animal partnerships would you like to see featured? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, in nature, just like in life, love really does conquer all.